and earth was available to me, I was ready to move. I did not like where I was. Texas, I never understood Texas. And the tornadoes, the big bugs. And so I was excited about the new heaven and the new earth. And I was sure that I didn't like the old earth, actually. And I knew that the old heaven probably wasn't very good either. And so anyway, this was 25 years ago, and I made it my purpose to live in this new heaven, in this new earth, and actually to see divinely from this I am. You see, we only can see from the I am to your I am if I'm in the new heaven and the new earth. No, we in the old heaven and the old earth, we kind of judge and compare each other, right? But these are the words that inspired me. Oh my God, when I heard them, I was so thrilled. And it's in Revelations 21, and it says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with his people. And God says, I will dwell with them, and I shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all their tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, and neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things have passed away. Oh my dear God, did I need the former things to pass away? Anyway, and then he said, behold, I make all things new. And God said to John, write, for these words are true and faithful. And then he said, it is done. Yahoo, those words, I decided I must live out of them. Well, I gather you guys are already living out of them. But anyway, I wanted to move there right away. And so I began to look for evidence of those wonderful words, but my eyes could only see nothing new, nothing wonderful, really. All I saw was meanness and limitation and pain and sorrow was predominant in my life at that time, but I knew there was hope. And in Isaiah, I read some of the same words, and it all said, I've created my people in this new heaven and earth to be a joyful, rejoicing people. Well, it took a long time for me to be one of those rejoicing and joyful people. But I knew that was in the horizon for me. 2 years it took just for me to get rid of my condemnations and my fears. I would write them down. It's going to sound weird. You guys would never have to do this. I was having to write them down hour by hour for 2 years. So much condemnation and fear. But I knew I was going to be moving into that new heaven and that new earth. So my old world was all about judging everyone and comparing myself to everyone and taking sides. And strife and struggle and sorrow was my life in that old heaven and earth. And there's a great love and guidance in this new heaven and earth, which you all know about. And I'm sure that you're all experiencing, the old earth is full of the most dreadful things. I just can't believe it as I look back. We've got chemtrails, we've got the HAARP, whatever that is. We've got drugs, we've got the 5G, we've got electromagnetic fields, we've got germs, we've got viruses, we've got enemies, and then we have guns for them. And so you can see the new heaven and the new earth, though, is a field that is so beautiful. So in that first world, there are enemies everywhere. You guys don't have them, but I'm telling you what it was like. Okay, omnipotence and omnipresence and omniscience is part of this new heaven and this new earth. So you're never fighting an enemy, which is cool. The new heaven and the new earth holds a coherent field of such harmony and love. God makes everything that I used to be afraid of impotent and puny and without any power, without any cause, without any law. And I moved, unless I move back into that first world, well, I can do that sometimes. And anyway, and I can give it some power, but then I quickly move out of it. It's not fun. We love God by giving the beliefs of this first world up. Just give them up. And I believe the greatest secret to moving into the new heaven and the new earth is to open our eyes. And from this place, everything is reframed. It is here now, this new heaven, this new earth. We know it, it's here now. We all know it. And we are awakening to it. We're meant to live in it, to see it, and to be filled with joy and rejoicing. So in the new earth and heaven, we respond to life instead of reacting to life. The Bible says in Matthew 6:22, I love this word. It says, the light of the body is the eye. So therefore, if your eye be single, your whole body will be filled with light. Single, now this is really, really important. This is so incredible. Single means in the Greek concordance of the Bible, it means you're free of duplicity. You are free of a double-mindedness and deceit. And if you're free of all that, you have a body full of light and wholeness. No, it's about seeking the kingdom of heaven now and loving God with all of our heart and all of our soul and with our whole mind, and loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. So who used to be an enemy now is someone I love. When our inner eye of the third eye, we might say the pineal, is single, it will glorify these two eyes for you to see the glory of God in every situation. So, and your eyes will become acquainted with a spiritual seeing or whole vision. Do you know when you are seen with whole vision, everything shifts. And the very person that you're looking at now is able to, he's being recognized. It is the most beautiful thing. So when that is where we are able to see past the appearances. In this new heaven and this new earth, you have these eyes that can see through an appearance because you know that there is a reality behind that appearance that is more real than the appearance. So our eyes either give us, this is really interesting. Our eyes are either giving us true sight or an illusion. Isn't that amazing? And it's all from depending on where our consciousness is. So you might say they are giving us, our eyes are giving us sensory knowledge, or they're giving us spiritual reality. Now, the next verse in Matthew 6:23 explains it all a little more. If your eye is unsound, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light in you is darkness, how dense is that darkness? Now, this sounds kind of negative, but it's just meaning if you want a whole, healed body, just stay away from judging situations. Yeah, okay. And quit judging yourself, feeling guilty because you think you didn't say something right or you should have said more and all that. You know, you give all that up in the new heaven and the new earth. Anyway, so that means that you begin to see, if you've ever seen yourself as ugly and not worthy, and you want to give all that up because that's not a part of the new heaven and the new earth. We are, because that just creates a body of pain and darkness. We don't want that. it also tells us in the verses above those two that I just read, that we are to live in a state of forgiveness, and we are not to keep laying up all of our treasures on earth where moth and dust and rust can defile and corrupt, and where thieves can come in and take it. So now the thing that's really interesting, that the treasures of earth belong to us when, but they must be byproducts of seeking first the kingdom of heaven and living in this new heaven and this new earth. Now, it also says in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. We cannot serve God and trying to please people to get their approval. Has that ever been fun? No, I don't think so. No one can serve two masters. We can't serve God. We can't serve mammon. It does say that real clear. So our senses are meant to be spiritualized. We're meant to see with the loving I am of our being. And then we have whole vision, and we give vision to others. And that helps in the awakening. The Bible says that if I am lifted up, I will lift all unto me, and that I in each of us is the beauty, it's the power, it's the love of our soul, and our world are lifted up when the I am, the God within us, is lifted up in our consciousness. When there is union with the I am within and our eyes, we produce different results because we see in completeness and we see in wholeness. The new heaven and earth is right now all around us and in us, wanting to be recognized. The old earth we awakened. This is really, really phenomenal. In the old earth, we usually awakened with sorrow and pain, but in the new one, we awaken with grace and joy. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? And we're just awakening to new dimensions, actually, in the new heaven and the new earth. So in the first world, we actually lived with hypnotism. We were, the hypnotism was giving us mental suggestions and images. And these images we learn are without substance, they're without cause. And the moment the hypnotism in our mind is destroyed, the image is destroyed. You see that within us, which is who I am, is that point of which all of the infinity of God pours itself into our world, making this new world and this new heaven very, very real, if we can identify with it and disidentify from the I that feels unworthy, not good enough. This new true reality gives us great joy and always a feeling of belonging and being loved and worthy. And this is the thing, I'm going to give you an example. I was working as a citizen diplomat or a civil diplomat in the USSR. That's when it was the USSR, which is what Putin wants it to be today, right? And so anyway, but I traveled there 47 times and over 7.5 years, training citizen ambassadors. So we were befriending people that we had been told were our enemies. And well, while outside Finland, we would experience Russian guards and dogs coming on the trains and looking through our luggage and looking for, getting our passport, looking at our passport, looking into our luggage to find religious material or pornography. And Cosmopolitan magazine was considered pornography, so that was taken away. And so anyway, well, on one trip, Patch Adams Dr. Patch Adams was with us. And you all heard of him? Good, good. Okay, and he was wearing his clown outfit, and he had a rubber nose on, and he kept that on through the whole trip. And they walked into his compartment on the train with their dog. And when they saw him, the guards could not stop laughing. I don't know if you know this or not, but in Russia, clowns are like, they're like God. People love clowns. And so they looked in his suitcase and found a suitcase full of rubber noses. So then he offered them one and they all put them on. And they couldn't stop laughing. They laughed at each other. They looked in the little compartment mirror in his room and they laughed until they were crying. And you see, and then what they did was the most unusual thing. They immediately adorned themselves with all these noses, and they laughed at each other, and they forgot to check our compartments. They just bolted up and down the aisles laughing with all of us. And so it was one of the most amazing things. It was like a miracle. And because usually they came on with disdain and antagonism and, just a feeling of where's your contraband so I can take it, your Book of John, whatever you got, we're taking it. And so anyway, but now they just saw us as funny friends. So what happened? They laughed at us, we laughed at them, and we just had the best time in the world. I believe that Patch Adams touched them at a place in consciousness where looking for contraband was at such a lower frequency that they couldn't even do their job. So they just stayed with us, and we all had so much fun, and their eyes only saw friends. So, and having a good time. You see, Patch Adams was able to lift his consciousness to a place where he lifted them. What happened was an amazing lesson. Rubber-nosed diplomacy is probably what the world needs right now in the Ukraine. And it literally melted their hearts and their minds. So having disembarked the train, actually, I was thinking it might be, maybe Unity would like to get into some rubber-nosed diplomacy. Well, you can take it up with the board. Anyway, so the next morning we disembarked on from there, and we were in, at the time, Leningrad. It's now St. Petersburg. And at the hotel, we set up, some of the people had brought up lots of crystals, and they set them up and they wanted to pray over them. Well, Patch Adams had gotten up very, very early, and he'd set up his own table of rubber noses, and he wanted them blessed. And so that was fun. And Patch Adams lived in the new heaven and the new earth. He was a spiritual giant, at least he was on that trip. And he had amazing consciousness of such joy. It was amazing. And he made such a contribution to the world that day. Anyway, he literally saw his world through the eyes of joy and love. And that is where we all kind of want to live, don't we? Whether it takes a rubber nose or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, he also shared that life has many wonderful games. And this was just one of them that he was involved in, dealing with the KGB, and he was just marvelous. So he brought everyone up and gave people such a joy. He had proved the working in the hospital. He worked with terminally ill children wearing his clown outfit, and had found that he could literally shift sad, mad, bad people to a new place. So I'm not advocating, of course, that we all get these noses, but it really is quite remarkable. Our founder, Charles Fillmore, said the inner eye is spiritual vision and intuitive seeing with the eye of truth. He said the single eye is open and receptive only to the guiding light of spirit. Blind eyes are a darkened consciousness, and when we gain illumination through truth, darkness disappears. Some people may be blind, but I do know a dear, dear friend of mine, and she would be considered blind, but she has vision. She has insight like I just can't even imagine. It's so beautiful. It says that in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall be out of obscurity and out of darkness. Our obscurity and darkness is when we believe and speak from duality with our eyes coming into agreement with it. Our eyes see either through our world conditioning or through the I am identity that is within us. And that I am identity is divine. It is through conditioning that we'll always have a judgment. Every time that you look out into the old world, your world will be flawed because you're seeing it out of that duality. But in that new heaven and new earth, that's a whole different thing, isn't it? There's nothing that we have to fear and make our point and do all that kind of thing. The thing about it is that in the old world, that when our eyes saw appearances, we came into agreement with them, that eventually we would have a testimony of that. That's kind of how it's so that's how it works. It is through conditioning, it will always have the judgment that will go with it. So example would be many people believe in, not in this room, but many people believe in chemtrails, for example, and they feel that they're being attacked and poisoned by them, and they can end up very sick. And if you see the very thing from the lens of divinity, you see it is impotent. You see beauty always in your sky. You're not suspicious of your sky. I know friends who go out and they're very suspicious of their sky. Well, it seems weird, you know? But anyway, we want to see from the oversoul. The oversoul is the universal principle, the absolute ultimate reality. One God, absolute reality. The oversoul is the place of divine thoughts. These are actually the words of Charles Fillmore. He said, spiritual perception is the apprehension of truth through intuition, the faculty of seeing spiritual reality in spite of appearances that they suggest to the contrary. And also, everyone we meet is to be recognized with spiritual perception. So I had a very dear friend who was totally innocent, having to do with chemtrails. She just loved looking out and seeing the beauty everywhere. It only took one friend to come over and tell her what was going on up there and the design she enjoyed. And she was sick, and the rest of her life, she was suspicious of her sky. That's the truth. Okay, so she'd go out every day wondering if this is the day she would be sick. So the I am seeing gives you divine immunity, and you take no thought. You live in a universe without thoughts of adversity. Now that's fun, isn't it? And so you don't want to fall back into the old world thinking. Another time in Moscow, my friend Dulcie and I, some of you met Dulcie. Well, we met this brilliant naturopath, and he invited us to his home. Well, we were just, the things he said were so wonderful. He was part of the new heaven and the new earth. And he was just amazing. Well, we lost track of time, and at 2 o'clock, we decided we better get home. That's 2 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, I had no idea it was that late. I was just shocked. And I said, well, I guess we better, go home. And to get there to his house, he took us on buses, he took us on trains, and we didn't realize he was trying to fool the KGB. And he was someone that the KGB had kind of been suspicious of. So we didn't know all that. But anyway, he said that all transportation stops at midnight. And he's not on a main road. He's like kind of out in the country. And we were miles from our hotel. And I'm one of the leaders on this trip. We have 80 people at the hotel. So he said, oh, don't worry, we'll just go outside and wait for a taxi. I said, well, why don't we just call a taxi? And he said, you see that phone is red. That means the KGB listens. So he decided that wasn't going to work. He said, oh, no, it's not a problem. We'll just go outside and a taxi will come. He said, I need you to trust me. He said, I want you both to hug this tree right here. And Dulcie whispers to me and she said, oh my God, she said, we're in real trouble. You know that, don't you? And it was just a dark sky and everything was dark and quiet. And my heart was just pounding. I was so frightened and I didn't make much of a contribution to him. But anyway, within about 10 minutes, a taxi came up the road. And I said to him, how did you do that? I was astonished. And he said, oh, it was easy. I saw the taxi intuitively before we left the apartment. I want to live like that. Life fulfills continually our seeing, where when we see the need being fulfilled and live out of that fulfillment before we receive it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I learned that as surely, I learned that as surely as we see what we believe what we see. We are meant to see life from a magnified vision of beauty. And if we don't have scales or veils of conditioning upon our eyes, we actually will see beauty from the perspective of our own I am divinity. The very first assignment that Jesus gave Paul, can you believe that Jesus would choose Paul, a serial killer, to give him the job of doing practically the entire New Testament? But the very first thing he said to him, hey, Paul, what I'm going to have you do is go out there and open their eyes. I want you to open their eyes and I want you to turn them from darkness to light. And I want you to turn them from Satan to God, one power. And everyone has come here to this earth to go through exactly what Paul did, as far as having our eyes open, move from darkness to light, and move from the powers of evil that are everywhere that people believe in. We're to move from that to the one power God. That's exciting, isn't it? Let's remember the eye of God that looks out through your eyes always sees good. Our eyes give life to the thoughts we think, the words we speak, the emotions we feel, thoughts that are animated and illumined by the light of joy and faith or noble purpose brighten our eyes with such love. Our eyes respond with health when we see from faith and insight, vision, light, and perfection. The one power, I would say that's probably the most important thing that you can think about, is living from the one power instead all of the powers out there. Remember, if you're involved in a lot of other powers, you're in the old world. You're in the first world that was supposed to have passed away. Okay, so eyes of those who instantly turn to God will be full of light. Eyes are the windows of the soul. And in Psalm, I love what David said. He said, open my eyes, God, that I may behold wondrous things out of your law. And then in 1 Samuel, I love this one. He said, for God sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. I love that. Matthew 13:15 says, this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart, and they would turn and they would be healed. This is just so exciting. I'll never forget when I first read that. I was just so thrilled because I knew my eyes were pretty dull and my ears were, but I knew there was hope. The body moves into healing patterns when our eyes and ears are open, and we understand with our heart from a spiritual perception without judgment. One day last week, I had an interesting experience. I was on the way to Sedona listening to the news, and I heard God say, turn off the radio, and I want you to look over there to your right, way off in the distance. And I looked over there, and he said, eyes that see the kingdom or see through the glory of God, those eyes will give nutrition to all that they see. All of creation is blessed with such eyes, and that glory and nutrition will return to you magnified. Don't you love that? Think about that when you're out and you're looking and you're hiking, that your eyes can give glory to everything you look at. Science has found that daily scenes of suffering and stress affect the pineal gland, and when the pineal gland is stressed, the eyes are. So we want to see that many children have been raised in a terrible way, in that they are told that they really don't see what they see. Daddy is home drunk. Oh, honey, he's just tired. He's just laying on the couch. And so they're continually told things that are not true. And if we get involved in a lot of other powers, what happens, we could be believing things that are not of the divinity and the I am and the omnipotence of God. And that affects our entire being. We don't see as well then. So we want to just think that we want to look out of the eyes that are going to give nutrition to everything we see. Many years ago, I had the opportunity of but being a part of Edmond Bordeaux Szekely, who was an Essene translator. And for about a year, I was able to be in all of his classes in Mexico. And he was a translator of the Essenes. And it is believed that Jesus and Mother Mary and many people Elijah were a part of this, the Essene people, and they actually lived in the new heaven and the new earth. They had perfect eyesight, and maybe it was because from birth they never recognized duality. They only recognized positive, constructive, loving frequencies in the universe that they said that's what's real. Anything else wasn't real. So they were known to see angels, sacred geometry. They could see into many dimensions. They fasted, they prophesied, they did not get angry, and this somehow gave them perfect eyesight. So they just didn't experience blindness. They lived to keep knowledge alive and bring light and peace to the world. And they said about Jesus's eyes, because Jesus was a part of their community many times, Jesus had beautiful eyes which changed colors from gray to green to blue. His eyes were piercing, his eyes were alive. These people had great endurance and strength. We always want to be receptive to God's sight and the I am presence that you know is within them, even though the appearance may not be such. So let's just close our eyes. Just experience right now this new heaven and this new earth. And I pray right now that our eyes would remain seeing the truth or the reality behind every appearance, that we might turn from darkness of seeing the duality, the duplicity, the powers of evil, but that we would turn to see the glory, the love, the beingness that is actually waiting to be recognized. Let us remember the words of authority from Jesus Christ when he said, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see." And we accept those blessed words of Jesus from the sanctuary of our own soul, where Christ abides, and now we're being blessed with light, perfecting our vision at this time. Acknowledge that light of God. Let this light shine in your mind and radiate through your thoughts, your words, and your eyes. And answer Jesus, "Blessed are my eyes, for they see." Oh, thank you, Father in heaven, for your consecrating our eyes today, that we might be able to see your glory in what we see. Oh God, let our vision be your vision. And when we look at our world through God perfected eyes, we find your world transfigured, because God pronounces a benediction of peace and beauty through you upon all that you see. God's enlightening our eyes, rejoicing our heart, and we see through God's perfect love. God is able. God is able. Thank you, Kenny. That song was so beautiful today. Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, for singing. Thank you so